You are listening to the Happiest Lives podcast with Jill Lillard, episode number 87.
Welcome to the Happiest Lives podcast, where you'll learn to think better, feel better, and become the woman God says you already are. Here's your host, Jill Lillard.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the series, Marriage Designed by God. Today, we're going to dive into something that every married couple faces, the reality of our differences. And if you're not married and you are a listener, you can apply this to differences that you experience in any relationship you have. Because if you're in a relationship with someone, you are going to run into a wall sometime with the different ways you perceive life, the different way you make decisions, the different ways you live, the different things you want. If you've ever wondered why your spouse seems to approach life in a completely different way than you, you're not alone. It can feel frustrating, and at times it may even feel like those differences are the very things driving you apart. But what if I told you that God, in His infinite wisdom, He's much wiser than we are, He made us different on purpose. Our differences are part of His divine design, intended to help us grow and to bring us closer to Him and to each other. Now, you could have married someone else than the person you're married to, and you would still have differences. I believe I married the perfect person for me, and we are so different. There are a lot of ways that we have common interest, but on some days, I look at us and think, what do we even have in common? We're so different. The way we approach the world is not the same. His interests are a lot different than mine. But when I offer the thought we have a lot in common, I can find evidence of that as well. So we're going to explore why God created us with different personalities and perspectives. I want to also look at the biblical foundation for these differences and how we can lean into them for a stronger, healthier relationship. You might be wondering why someone so different from you is the person you ended up marrying. It can be a real source of frustration when your spouse handles things in a way that feels completely foreign. Maybe you're a planner. You like structure and order, and your spouse seems to thrive in spontaneity. Or perhaps you're someone who processes conflict immediately while your partner needs time and space to think before engaging. Maybe you're an extrovert and your partner's an introvert. It's easy to see these differences as obstacles, as reasons why things aren't working. I've experienced this in my own life, both in my marriage as a leader when I've led groups of people. I've had employees, I've led teams in ministry. I've had friends that we've engaged in life together. And so we're going to maybe come head to head with some of our differences. At times, the actions of the other person may feel hurtful, or it may feel inconsiderate simply because they approach life differently than I do. Something that I've learned over the years is what it means for another person to do something isn't necessarily the same that it would mean if I were doing that same thing. Their perspective, their process, and their motives are different. I've realized if I hold on to my expectation that another person should see the world exactly as I do, I miss out on understanding who they truly are and the unique strengths they bring to the table. So maybe you have a friend, you have felt hurt by this friend because of some of their actions. And yet when you open yourself up to see this person as God created them to be, there is a beautiful person there. But sometimes we can get so stuck in our hurt and in the misunderstandings and in our different wants, we might miss out on a relationship with that person. So the big question is why God made us different. I believe it's because He wants us to grow. Growth happens when we're stretched, challenged, and asked to see beyond our own perspective. When we encounter differences in our spouse, it's a moment of choice. We can dig in our heels and insist that our way is right, or we can humble ourselves and open our minds to the possibility that their perspective has value too. I think another reason God made us different is because it's more interesting. Think of all the animals that look different, zebras and giraffes and polar bears and cats and dogs and birds. Like, this variety in creation is interesting and it's beautiful. God designed marriage to be a refining process. So our differences are not mistakes. They're part of His plan to shape us more into Christ-like individuals. It's not easy, especially when it feels like your partner isn't willing to accommodate or accept influence. But instead of focusing on what they're not doing, we can choose to focus on our part, accepting their influence, understanding that God gave them personality and perspective, and being open to the growth He wants to bring through the process. It's easy to turn away and deal with things on your own when you feel hurt or lonely, isolated in your relationship, when you're thinking this person is so different than me and we have nothing in common. You're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel discouraged. You're going to feel sad. And with that emotion, you're going to shut down, withdraw. You might quit making bids to connect. You might quit responding to your partner's bids to connect. And all you do is you prove your differences. So that is an alternative for you. But if you've been in that loop of thinking and feeling and doing, then you might want to consider an alternative way to think about your relationship. And today I want to give you some ways that are going to hopefully help you feel more empowered, because you can focus your energy on what you can bring to the table, how you want to show up in the relationship, and how you can think about your partner and your differences so that you can continually turn toward in a way that is going to give you more influence. And if your partner is not open to your influence, that you can still hold on to joy and peace and not just feel discouraged, hopeless, and disheartened. From a biblical standpoint, the differences between men and women are foundational to God's design. Genesis 1:27 tells us that God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. So both men and women reflect God's image, but they're going to do so in different ways. Men and women are designed to complement each other, not to compete with one another. So throughout Scripture, we see distinct roles and characteristics assigned to each gender. Men often reflect God's strength, leadership, and provision, while women showcase God's nurturing, relational depth, and intuitive wisdom. Now, this doesn't mean that women can't be leaders, that women can't reflect strength. I believe they can. And it doesn't mean that men can't reflect a nurturing relational depth. They do. They can as well. And God is a reflection of all of these characteristics, but there may be some way in their different roles of how He brings two people together that one is going to be maybe more of a responder and one may be more of an initiator. So there's going to be overlap, and every individual is unique, but these general patterns reflect the beauty of God's intentional design. As a woman, you may be the one who has to manage the relationship. Who better than you? When we embrace these differences, we step into a fuller, richer reflection of God's character. So instead of letting our differences become points of contention, we can see them, you could see them as an opportunity to honor and learn from this other person that God has placed in your life. In marriage, you're not just merging two individuals. You're creating a culture that never existed before. This is something I heard from John Gottman, the guru of marriage. This culture is based on a blend of your background, your experience, values, and personalities. It's a unique combination that's not going to look exactly like either one of you. It is shaped by your differences, and that's a good thing. So when I married my husband, Rich, it didn't become an extension of Jill, and our relationship didn't just become an extension of Rich. It became a blending of both of our thoughts, personalities, desires, wants, and perspectives. And to me, that is such a beautiful thing. It's like having a baby. Your child is going to be a reflection of both of your DNA. And then the relationship that you share becomes this entity that takes on its own personality. So it's easy to get stuck to make the marriage look like what you grew up with, or trying to fit your spouse into your mold. And I think this is part of the leaving and cleaving. You're leaving your parents, you're leaving how your family of origin thought about things, how your parents, maybe what they wanted in life, and you are opening yourself up to what your partner wants and desires as well. God's plan is for something new and dynamic to emerge from your union together. So think of your marriage as a new family branch, deeply rooted in your individual past, but it's growing in a unique direction. The way you communicate, how you solve problems, how you express love, it will be distinct because it's a fusion of both of you. That's a sign of a healthy growth in unity, not of discord. We all have unique personalities. So whether we think about them in terms of the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, or the classic temperaments like sanguine, choleric, melancholy, and phlegmatic, these personality differences are reflections of God's image, showcasing different aspects of his character. I love looking at different personality test. We've done that in different times in our family where everyone's kind of taken the quiz, and it's interesting to see overlaps. If you do this with your extended family, we did this on a family chain, and it's different to see how different people are alike. You may already know that they're alike, but to see, oh yeah, my son is a lot like my dad. They fall into the same personality, or my mom and my niece have a lot of overlap. And so to me, that is so fascinating and interesting. And yet within this family, you're going to have some big differences. One's going to be more of a nurturer and supporter, and another person's going to be more of a leader. So if we look at the classic four temperaments, the sanguine, for instance, they may bring joy and enthusiasm to the table. They are reflecting God's creativity and his delight. The choleric, with their decisive nature, embodies God's leadership and strength. The melancholy, who is reflective and thoughtful, mirrors God's deep wisdom and empathy. And the phlegmatic, with their calm and steady demeanor, represents God's peace and patience. Now, I am probably more of a choleric and melancholy personality, while my husband is more of a phlegmatic, sanguine personality. And so there are things that might irritate us about the other person, and yet there is such beauty in that. So rather than me resisting some of his phlegmatic traits, I can appreciate that he is calm, he is steady, and he can lead people in a different way than I can. They actually show that the sanguine phlegmatic is actually a really effective leader. And whereas the choleric is a great leader too, their leadership style is going to look different. So all of these traits are strengths, but they also have a weakness. So there's the flip side of the coin. A sanguine may struggle with follow through, while choleric might need to develop more patience. A melancholy can get lost in perfectionism, and a phlegmatic might avoid necessary conflict. In marriage, these differences can feel like a stumbling block, but they're actually areas where God is inviting us to grow and to lean on one another's strengths. And I've seen in my own marriage how we've kind of rounded one another out, how my husband has actually become a more round person. And I believe I have too, as we have been willing to grow and shape one another. We mirror a little bit more of each other than we even did before. So we can complement one another, and we can also pull one another out to grow in areas where we may be a little weaker. One of the greatest lessons I've learned in my marriage and in my relationships with other people, friendships, leadership, is the gift of humility. It's easy to write people off because they don't function the way we do. But when we let go of our expectation that other people should see the world as we see the world, then we're going to open ourselves up to deeper understanding and connection. Accepting influence from your spouse is a powerful act of humility and love. It means being willing to say, maybe I don't have the full picture here. Maybe I need your perspective too. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to always agree, but it means you value their input. You're opening yourself up to deepen your understanding and to be influenced. And you're trusting that God is using their differences to shape you both. So instead of resisting your differences, what if you leaned into them? Instead of trying to change your spouse, what if you allowed God to use those differences to refine you? It's really easy to see how somebody else can change. When we're looking at them, we can evaluate them and think, if they would do this differently, or if they would think how I think, if they would accept more influence, if they would be willing to deepen understanding, then our relationship would grow. Now, I do believe we have a role in our partner's life to speak the truth in love. At times, we're going to correct or admonish. We are going to shine a light in areas of their life that other people don't or won't or can't. And they may accept that influence or they might resist it. It is to their benefit to accept that influence. Yet if your partner is not accepting your influence in the way you would like them to, you cannot control or make that happen. And the more you nag, the more you try to manage that, the more resistant they will probably become. And so you can pray about this. You can pray that you might have more influence. You might pray that they might open their eyes to maybe see different aspects of their character that they're not seeing, if there's maybe some selfishness there. And you can turn toward, ask the Lord to show you when to speak, when to be silent, so that you are leaning into, that you aren't giving up on the turning toward, on trying to have influence. But we want to do this in a way where we're not trying to control. So the alternative is you keep trying to manage, control, change them, or you try to control and change you. You focus on what you are thinking, how you are feeling, how you're showing up. There's always so much that you can do, and your energy is going to be better spent looking at ways that you can show up differently in your relationship if the way you're showing up isn't working. So when you focus on your response, your openness, your willingness, and you choose to embrace the differences, you're participating in God's work of shaping both you and your partner into the image of Christ. God didn't make us the same for a reason. He made us different so we could sharpen one another. We could deepen our faith and draw closer together. And we recognize our need to rely on the Lord as the middle man, the Lord as the father of both of us. When we embrace our differences, when we turn toward the Lord with our frustrations, and we keep ourselves open to receive and turn toward our partner, we are going to reflect the full, beautiful diversity of God's nature. Thank you guys so much for listening today. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with a friend or your spouse. Leave me a review. I always appreciate podcast reviews. It helps the algorithm so we can get this message out there to more people. And if you're looking for more support in embracing God's design for your marriage, make sure you go to myhappyvault.com and look at the different ways that we can work together. I offer tools and support to help you grow stronger, even through your differences. Remember, God uses the differences in your marriage to shape you into the person He wants you to be. Lean into that process, trust His design, and let His love guide you. Take care, and God bless. I hope this episode encouraged and inspired you. If you're ready to take the next step and make real, lasting changes, I want to personally invite you to join me in the Happiest Lives Academy. I'm looking for 10 women who are ready to break free from old patterns, heal the relationships, and step into the fullness of being the woman God says they already are. This is a time-sensitive calling. We start January 1st, but enrollment is happening now. This 5-month intensive is all about working closely together with personalized coaching, faith-based tools, and a supportive, Christ-centered community. If you've been feeling that nudge to go deeper, don't delay. Now is the time to say yes and invest in these 5 transformations. Visit My Happy Vault to learn more and secure your spot. I can't wait to meet you and walk alongside you as you step into this new chapter. Until next time, keep trusting God's plan for your life. And remember, circumstances don't define your happiness.